to kick things off. I'll give it another like 30 seconds to a minute or so, and then I will kick off with the introduction. Okay, we are ready to kick things off. I'm gonna get going on this. A few participants have joined, so everyone, a big welcome to everyone that has joined already. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Grant James. I'm the head of business development at Stitch, and I'm really excited to speak with some of the leading minds in South Africa's crypto and blockchain space tonight. Now, to paint a picture and give a little bit of context, South Africa ranks as 9th in the world in terms of the percentage of the population that actually owns cryptocurrency, and 2nd in Africa. So this means that there's a massive opportunity in this market for this technology to play a largely significant role in our financial future. And one of the most impactful and important applications of crypto is really improving the movement of money. Right? So whether that's buying or selling cryptocurrencies, making investments, saving funds, sending money cross-border, or essentially just leveraging the blockchain technology to power what may look like more traditional financial services in a better way. So for those of you that might not be familiar with Stitch, and my hope is that this number is really dwindling and growing smaller by the day, but we're an API and infrastructure company, and our goal is to make it easier for businesses in Africa to launch and scale solutions by essentially enabling better, faster, and more secure movement of money into and out of users' bank accounts. And one of the most exciting use cases for Stitch payment solutions is, of course, the crypto space, right? So today we work with a number of the leading crypto companies in the country, acting as a bridge between the fiat and crypto financial worlds with instant bank-to-bank transfers, reduced fraud, and lower fees. And tonight, we'll be digging into the space, looking at some of the trends related to the newer developments like decentralized finance, Web3, the latest on the regulatory environment, and lessons from entrepreneurs and investors on how to successfully go to market, scale, and raise investment for crypto ventures. Now, I'm very lucky to be joined by a group of distinguished panelists across the crypto space to discuss these topics. And want to kick off with some quick introductions of the panelists before we actually dive in. Right, so introducing the panel, Brenton, Naicker. I'm going to actually go in alphabetical order. So we have Brenton, Naicker joining the panel. I first met Brenton in his time at Binance, where he was a business development manager. He is now the director of capital formation and growth for Africa at CVVC, which is essentially a crypto-focused venture firm. I'm going to run through all of these, Brenton, and then I'll ask you to give your own introduction once I'm done. Also joined by Gwera, Kiwana. Gwera is a founder in residence crypto at MFS Africa and a big voice in the space on the continent. Yaliwe Soko, who's the chairperson of the United Africa Blockchain Association. I know Yaliwe was having some trouble getting on the call, so hopefully she'll be able to join us in a second or two. And then also the main man, Thato Mokoena, the country manager for Yellow Card in South Africa. Yellow Card is one of the larger crypto exchanges on the continent, just given the sheer reach that they have from a country perspective. So I want to hand it over to the panelists for a quick introduction. If you could give us like 30 seconds to a minute a little bit about yourself, your experience and your journey with crypto. Brenton, we'll kick off with you, then Gwera, then Thato.
Awesome. So firstly, I just want to say to Stitch and Grant, thanks for having us. It's engagements like this, I think, that really help the space move forward. So like Grant said, one of the team here at CVVC. So everyone knows about Silicon Valley. And our claim to fame really is that we were one of the founding fathers of Crypto Valley, which is, our own equivalent out in Switzerland. So we're an early stage venture investor, but we also build and grow ecosystems. We do everything from reports to industry meetups to workshops for corporates. And then interestingly enough, I've been in the crypto space, or the crypto and blockchain space for about 6 years now. So I'd like to think I'm kind of like the furniture in the space locally. So as Grant mentioned, I spent 2 years at Binance leading out some of our expansion there on the African continent. Before that, I did a whole bunch of boring stuff with family offices and high net worth individuals. And I've been very involved in the crypto space from the beginning. So, I was very privileged to be invited by the Reserve Bank to be a part of their working group to develop this digital asset and blockchain regulation that I think we're going to be touching on today. So, on the other side,
too much away, Brenton.
on the other side of the coin, I've also been a founder. And I'm as Grant and me were chatting about earlier, I'm now sitting on the other side of the table as a VC. So I know what it's like to be on both sides of the table, and hopefully, I can help you wherever you're sitting with some of the things we chat about today.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Brenton. Gwera, over to you.
Yeah, hi. So first of all, again, I feel like it's so cliche to say this, but shout out to the people of Stitch. Like, honestly, if you don't know about Stitch, you better recognize, you better figure out who they are. They're doing a lot of really cool stuff to drive fintech across the continent and connectivity and all that. So hi, I'm Gwera. So for those who don't know me, I'm currently, very recently starting a role as the founder in residence of crypto at payments giant across the continent, MFS Africa. So up until now, they've been quite heavily focused on mobile financial services, mobile money interoperability across the continent and beyond. But now I'm here to help figure out what crypto means for them. But before this, previously, I've been a bit of a fintech nerd, previously at Monzo, previously at my own venture, but more recently I was at 11FS, where I worked as a consultant building digital financial services around the world, and more recently really focused on fintech solutions, so bridging the gap between fintechs and crypto companies. As somewhat of a degen myself, I try to do a little bit more beyond degen life, and very, very, very interested in the utility of crypto for the African continent. So yeah, also I'm Ugandan, so hello, based in London right now, but yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gwera. And what an impressive, decorated background. Yaliwe, we have you here. You haven't missed anything.
Hi guys. So I had to change devices. I've been struggling.
I'm so happy that you're able to make it. We're just running through some introductions. I won't put you on the spot initially. Thato, we'll go to you first, and then Yaliwe will come to you next.
Awesome, thanks, Grant, and much appreciated for hosting this session. So I'm Thato. I head up country operations for Yellow Card in South Africa. Yellow Card is basically a Pan-African crypto exchange operating in some 16 countries across Africa. And I think I always term myself as a bit of a financial inclusion champion, and I found fintech to be sort of like a good avenue to achieve a lot of those objectives. So I think including the work that we've been doing at Yellow Card, seeing how we can sort of like build out use cases with crypto in South Africa across the region. Prior to Yellow Card, worked at a small company called Uber in their operations team, also trying to figure out different fintech solutions that we could sort of like bring into market to help both riders and drivers on the platform. Before that, worked at a company called Allen Gray and dabbled my hands in some VC work earlier on in my career. So a bit of a financial services fundi, but relatively new to the crypto space. And I think it's also been very interesting for me to work in this environment and learn at the same time. So definitely hoping to sort of share what I've learned thus far in my journey. Thanks, Grant.
Thanks, Thato. When we speak about the future of finance, really excited to hear some of your input there. Yaliwe, very happy that you're able to join us. And apologies for some of the technical issues, but would love you to share just an introduction on yourself, like some of the work that you're doing and your journey with crypto. You could take about 30 seconds to a minute to do so.
Okay, can you guys hear me clearly?
Perfectly.
Okay, so I'm Yaliwe Soko, and I chair the United Africa Blockchain Association. And I've been in the blockchain space since 2016, originally from, I would say, a bit of everything. So I was in the oil and gas sector for like 5 years, and no, actually more than 5 years, maybe 6 years. But during that time, I was also trying to navigate the blockchain and crypto space, founded the United Africa Blockchain Association in 2019 with a few other people who are enthusiasts in the same space. The main goal was to really foster adoption through education, right? And not only education and adoption, but also kind of seeing how do we develop skills, how do we allow Africans to innovate, and how do we really come to the party and make sure that Africans are stakeholders in this revolution that's coming up. So ran a number of projects, especially educational campaigns, but also being a global speaker. I think nominated as one of the most influential women in the blockchain space globally, but also one of the most, the top 10 women in blockchain in Africa, and just, you know, some of those little aspects. And I'm also an Ethereum DevCon alumni. I was part of the scholars for Ethereum DevCon in 2019, and I emerged top learner, so which earned me the title of DevCon Queen, Ethereum DevCon Queen in 2019. So there's just a few things here and there, but really passionate about blockchain in Africa and how we can really help foster and also help change the way Africa relates and also does things.
Amazing. Thanks so much. I must say I'm very lucky to be speaking with such a distinguished panel. But to paint a bit of picture and getting into some of the questions and discussions, right? We're going to go through a few different themes, but really we're keen to understand more about the practical crypto and blockchain use cases in South Africa, particularly when it comes to ways that we can actually leverage the blockchain technology to make it easier, faster, or more efficient to move money. And it wouldn't be a crypto conversation without discussing like the current state of the markets and prices as well. But I think as a first theme, we want to touch on some of the trends and evolutions, right? So Thato, I'd like to start with you, all right? Can you tell me or tell us a bit more about how the crypto space has evolved in South Africa over the past few years and what the trends are that you're seeing for the year ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. So I think South Africa is a very interesting case, and maybe sort of pointing back to some of the stats that you spoke to regarding adoption. Adoption in South Africa has been quite strong relative to a lot of other markets across the world. But like everything, I think in terms of the crypto industry, it started off sort of as a niche within the financial services sector, and just more generally as a technology, with certain groups of people dabbling, trying it out, and I think also leveraging and looking at what was being done internationally. And I think South Africa is one of those markets which also paved the way with some early entrants in the crypto space and making it available to a wide user base in the country. And sort of that trend has also held strong going forward. So even for us in SA, you spoke to price. It's been a bit of a roller coaster year when it comes to crypto prices, but that's bound to happen. It's a new technology, it's a new asset, and so you appreciate some of the volatility that you see in the sector. But even with that said, I think we are still seeing quite a healthy appetite, a lot of people wanting to learn more, find out more about crypto, trying to get an insight into where this thing is going. People also wanting to find out how they can participate. So I think that's one of the things that I sort of like see in South Africa. And that's one of the things that we also are looking at, and seeing how we can sort of like plug ourselves from a platform and an adoption point of view, just providing simple services and simple tools for people to get into the ecosystem. But still a lot of scope. So even if we are a country with a relatively high adoption rate, I think there's still a lot of people who aren't necessarily familiar with what's happening in the space, and definitely a big opportunity for people to learn more, and sort of like try and get into the space to figure out what's happening. I think it's so interesting what you're saying, and Brenton, I actually want to pull you in here because you spoke about it initially, and I think that there was some lively debate just before this call between like yourself and Gwera, appetite across the crypto space, and you've essentially seen trends from like being on the founder side to exchange side and now on an investment side. Like what are some of your thoughts and opinions or observations that you've seen from a trend perspective as well?
So I think, looking again at both sides of the coin, I think there's this very niche population in South Africa. And I mean, to link it back to a funny story, I think a lot of the people on the call will relate to this. From about like 2016, every single crypto meetup, even in different cities, there would be the same 15 or 20 people that would be at every single meetup, and it's so funny because you can actually see the difference in attendance during bull markets and bear markets. But there was this very small core niche group who, tried to advocate from, building startups in the space, couldn't get banking accounts. Banks wouldn't take them seriously. This is speaking about 2018, 2019, 2020. And then on the corporate side, there were a lot of people working within these incumbents, your tier one banks, your tier one asset managers. And we were talking about it earlier, there'd be someone inside who had this penny drop moment, and they would be singing, till the cows came home, but they couldn't convince the organizations to move. And we were also chatting about this has largely been, this corporate culture of wait and see. And I think if we look at the developments in the markets we look to, the US and Europe, over the last 2 years, 3 years particularly, you've started to see those same players, the mirror of these players there, really starting to make active moves in both the crypto and the blockchain space. And because of that, we're now seeing, in a sense, where banks want that crypto business, right? It's such a big business now. So whether you're doing arbitrage, etc., as long as you're compliant, banks now want to service you. There's the appetite there. And the incumbents who previously were just waiting and seeing, I'm now, really privileged to be involved with a lot of them. Like, you would be shocked at the number of large-scale corporates in South Africa that are busy piloting blockchain and crypto solution. Everything from remittance rails to micropayments, peer-to-peer lending and finance, and it's been this explosion of appetite and interest, I'd say, over the last 12 months, and the upcoming regulatory changes in South Africa have sort of accelerated that, because one of the biggest
before you jump into the regulatory changes, because I want to just like deal with crypto evolutions and trends, as well as across the blockchain, and I love what you're saying about the utility and some of the use cases, so definitely want to dive into that. But I'd like to also understand this from a blockchain perspective. So Yaliwe, want to pull you in here and essentially understand a little bit more about the blockchain space in South Africa, some of the trends that you're seeing just from the association perspective, interesting use cases that you find like particularly interesting at the moment, to give an indication of where we could be heading as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Grant, and thanks, Brenton, for that overview. And when Brenton said something, like there was a time where there was just like the same people in the room, and I stopped attending events because I was just like, it's like startups speaking to startups and just people looking at each other. And I literally stopped attending events because of that. But we've seen a lot of evolution from whereby the innovation side, and also you say the adoption on the consumer side, right? Though sometimes people get into the space for the wrong reason, but sometimes the wrong reason is the right platform to bring the right things to the people. So you find that, oh, just because they've heard of something, and I've seen people who I never thought would even try and get into this space, trying to navigate the space and understand what a coin is, and later on you give them the right information. So looking at an association point of view, we went in with the education, but besides the education, we went in with the knowledge of saying, learn about it, but let's do something about it, right? And there's so many use cases. Firstly, I think the exchange, I'll just say the exchange ecosystem in South Africa is amazing. I've seen the growth, the innovation. I've seen exchanges that are trying to really bring the payment systems into the entire exchange ecosystem. So it's not just about trading. It's not just about, okay, me being able to convert my crypto, but me being able to remit and to pay somebody. I do that a lot. Sometimes I'd rather just send a payment over an email, or some of the exchanges are doing that in South Africa. That ecosystem is really amazing. And secondly, I've seen some real good use cases, such as, I think, let me just make reference to Thato. I think that for me has been amazing to see how an entire platform can transform lives using the blockchain technology, and also have conversations with UN agencies, right? So it's just showcasing that blockchain is not, it's as far as your imagination can go. That's all I'll say. So, and it's good to see people's imaginations running wild and really trying to utilize the technology for different things. It's remittances, it's social good, you name it. And I normally give an example of the remittance space. Being in South Africa is very diverse. You have everybody from everywhere, right? So if you, let's take two use cases. Let's take two different countries. I think mostly in Africa, when you speak crypto, you speak blockchain, you usually speak Nigeria, you speak South Africa, Kenya, somewhere there, and the other countries come in, right? So if you speak Nigeria, everybody's trying to get out of Nigeria. That's one use case. And everybody's trying to get into South Africa from the rest of Africa, right? So you find that there's always a lot of money going out of South Africa, whether it's in small quantities to different parts of Africa, and there's a lot of money coming into Nigeria because there's Nigerians everywhere. Almost everywhere around the world that you'd walk into, at least you'd walk into some place, you'll meet a Nigerian. So when it comes to all those things, it's just different use cases, and crypto and blockchain really come together and say, I can serve both sides. It just, like I said, it depends on how much imagination can run.
I want to jump in there because I think like it's interesting what you're saying about like imaginations running wild and really building in the space, because obviously like a big part of this, and bringing you back in here, Brenton, is regulation, because we need to lay like some sort of regulation down, because there's also like a danger to running too wild, right? And in South Africa, we've seen some movement from a regulatory perspective. I mean, the SARB recently announced that it's set to introduce new regulation around trading cryptocurrency, like over the next like 12 to 18 months. Brenton, could you share some of like your insights on this? I know that you're working like quite closely with the regulators through the IFWG and the like.
Brilliant. No, so look, I think just building on your statement firstly, before we come to the specific regulatory situation, is that has been the biggest sort of barrier for corporates adopting, for financial services supporting the space, for startups to being able to build and get funding, is because without regulatory certainty, it's so hard to know what you can and you can't do. So I must compliment the South African Reserve Bank in this regard. So like Grant mentioned, for those of you who aren't familiar, back in about 2016, 2017, I think, SARB put together a group with everyone's favorite Uncle SARS and our treasury, etc. And they brought together all of the players, and they were like, please explain this to us. Let's work together to build something. Unfortunately, COVID came around and delayed things, but you've just got to understand it from the regulator's perspective, is that they have one goal. When they say we need to regulate crypto, we need to bring about regulations, they have one real goal, and that's to protect consumers, because there's a lot of bad actors in the space. I mean, we've seen, unfortunately, from South Africa alone, I think 2 of the biggest crypto Ponzi schemes, or scams or fraud. The regulators really just want to prevent things like that. And recently, they basically announced that when you're dealing with someone, they're only worried about a few things. Who are they? Where do they get their money from? Is it legal? Make sure that they're not a terrorist, that they aren't a criminal. And we have regulations that fit that in our current FSP regulation, right? So things like KYC, AML, when you submit your ID or your passport on these platforms, that's what you're doing. And by adopting a very similar framework in crypto, it allows them to protect consumers while still allowing the industry to build new products and services. And I think it's just a starting point, because blockchain has far more use cases. But specifically when it comes to investing and moving money, which I think we're speaking about today, it's very important to have that actual regulatory framework in place. So actual laws that you need to follow. And that is really going to unleash this exponential involvement from corporates and startups, the ability to build with confidence in South Africa. So we're probably going to see that come about in the next 12 to 18 months, according to them. And once that comes, you're really going to see an exponential uptick in all things crypto in South Africa.
I mean, from our perspective, right, and just looking at it, like what we want to see is more utility in the space. And speaking about utility as a theme, right, something that we're really interested in at Stitch is helping business build products that would add value to the market, whether that's like helping them make it easier for consumers to achieve their financial goals, or just making it easier for them to seamlessly engage with digital payments. Now, Gwera, coming to you, a lot of your work actually centers around the utility of cryptocurrencies, right? Why is this so important, and what kind of utility do you see crypto and its associated technologies like Web3, DeFi actually having on African countries, and like particularly in the geo that we're in South Africa?
I'm going to start with just kind of addressing kind of what Brenton said earlier about South Africa being a leader. And that we do have the risk of what's called regulatory arbitrage. So where crypto firms will flock to South Africa to build there rather than build in their native countries, because in my opinion, South Africa is leading the way in terms of thoughtful regulation and like thoughtful, measured approach to regulating cryptocurrencies, because of the approach that is considering utility, rather than like what we're seeing in my home country, Uganda, or even Kenya, or even Nigeria, where it's kind of a little bit punitive in that it's like, oh, this crypto thing is taking money out of our economy. It's potentially attracting the FATF, the Financial Crime Action Task Force, like for dubious activity. So South Africa seems to be the country in which regulation is the most thoughtful. So I've been personally involved in the project that Brenton alluded to, which is Project Coca, KHOKA, which is a group of banks and fintechs and the regulator SARB working to, again, have a thoughtful approach. So in terms of utility, if I was in a pub right now with a couple of glasses of wine, and I could give you a list of utility products that I'd feel confident, yeah, this is what's going to happen. But I think I'm going to approach it with a bit of a measured approach right now, because we don't know. I mean, there's so many approaches we can think of right now. So there's identity. So going after solving the problem with identity solutions across the continent with NFTs, for example. There's the stablecoin options. So payments companies, banks, countries adopting stablecoins. There's also the CBDC route, and we've seen how that's gone in Nigeria. So the thing is with utility, it is almost like, I'm scared to even give like solid answers right now because we don't know. We're still so early. But what I do know is that like Africa is, and South Africa in general, is the perfect use case, the perfect home for this kind of utility, because it's kind of a blank slate. The piping and the plumbing does not exist quite yet. So where I've recently started working, MFS Africa, they've done quite a bit to build this interoperability for mobile money between countries across the continent. That is one step, but I think that's still quite expensive. That's quite clunky. Stablecoins, crypto in general, could take it that step further. So in terms of utility grants, when you ask that question, I'm hesitant to give a strong answer because I come from this idea of skeuomorphism, which is the concept of like understanding something in the form that you've known it to be before. So like previously the phone icon on the iPhone looked like an actual telephone. Millennials and people before millennials say this about telephone, whereas Gen Z use this, they say this, because we had that skeuomorphic idea of what telephones are. So even with technology, we understand things to be in the way that we understand them as right now. I think we need to completely reimagine the use cases, and even maybe, I don't know, it might not even happen. It probably will happen in my lifetime. I'm still quite young, but we're still yet to see what that looks like, and we really need to do that job of like that work of rejecting the skeuomorphic idea of like what things look like. So email is probably a best example. Like if I was to use email versus email in Web 2 versus Web 3 right now, what is Web 3 known for right now? Trading, right? So people trading coins. They don't understand how the underlying technology works, but they're trading coins. In the past, email, people were like, oh, I can send a letter, this piece of paper that I've been using mail to send to my auntie on her birthday. I can now send something via the internet. But now we have social media. Now we have, various, WhatsApp, like various forms of communication that could never have been imagined at the time. So when you ask about utility, I'm hesitant to give a solid answer because my answer is a cop-out in a sense. It's like, we don't know yet. And I'm personally very excited to be at the forefront, pushing the edge, and hopefully be there to build the new stuff.
I mean, like that's understood. And I think it highlights like Yaliwe's point a little bit earlier around like imagination running free, right? But koka is actually, it's a Zulu word, and it means pay in Zulu. So like it's like project pay, project koka. But Yaliwe, when it comes to you, right? And a lot of your work on the ground, speaking with people, communities in Southern Africa, and it's also really centered around crypto and blockchain practical applications, right? So as the United African Blockchain Association, you've recently been really active in Zambia, right? With the launch of the Blockchain for Social Good initiative. Could you tell us a little bit more about the project and the way that you believe blockchain has the potential to transform the lives of Africans?
Okay, can you hear me, guys? I think I lost Grant a little bit there.
Yeah, we can hear you. Which point did you lose me? I'm happy to repeat.
Okay, so I think my network is a little bit shaky, but talking about the blockchain for social good, really the entire idea was to showcase the feasibility of blockchain technology for social good within the African context. And this was in partnership with the Ministry of Technology and Science. And that was after training them and giving them kind of general knowledge on what blockchain can do for the country. And the minister goes like, okay, we understand this is great for everything. Look, qualifications, you're talking about land registrations, but what about the person down there in the township? What do we do for them? So we came up with something that we said, okay, let's showcase the feasibility of blockchain technology for social good. And we looked at different aspects and different categories of people within those townships. First, we're looking at the spaza shop owners. How do we enable them to really accept cryptocurrency as a form of payment for goods and services? And we're looking at, okay, the youth, right? There's a lot of unemployment in the country. How do we teach them a new skill, but how do we incentivize them in crypto for attending classes, but not only incentivize them for them to only keep the crypto, but to purchase basic human needs? And then how do we look at the youth that are prone to substance abuse? Because there's this whole thing of saying, let's jail them, let's do this, or let's get the police involved, but you're putting away the future. Why don't we kind of look at them and say, how do we change the mindset and show them something something new, something that could change their mindset instead of them depending on the government for jobs. Because some of those behaviors are out of frustration. And then we look at the women that are running households, because eventually it all goes back to the home. When these kids mess up, it comes back to the mother, the father, it comes back to the grandparents. How do we help them? How do we give them some form of unconditional basic income? So that was the entire idea. But firstly, we said, let's start with education. And the education is different for all categories. And also, let's educate them in their own language. So we broke down the blockchain technology into vernacular. So it was like English vernac, educate them. And then from there, how do we allow them to interact? So we had market days, like whereby people are given coins and now they're able to purchase, whether it's a chicken, whatever it is. I think Brenton, you saw some of those pictures from the streets, and whatever it is, they were so happy. Remember, it's all about utility, right? So sometimes we see things from an aerial view. We've got all those beautiful terms for blockchain technology, beautiful jargons, but at the end of the day, if it only benefits the people at the top, it's pointless. So we looked at it and said, if we start from the bottom, it's very easy to go to the top, because the people at the top are always looking at the people at the bottom for adoption. But if we feed the people at the bottom with the right knowledge, then we don't have to worry about the people at the top because they get it faster. And with that, we figured out a few things. Firstly, usually blockchain technology has to do with smartphones. And you're educating people, only maybe about 40% have smartphones. And then from there, maybe about a certain percentage have feature phones, and some of them don't even have phones. But then there was one lady that we spoke to, because we actually had to go on the streets and talk to people. One lady didn't have a smartphone, but she said, I want to come and learn. The first time she attended the class, the next day she brought 50 people, including her daughter, who had a smartphone, right? Because she saw value in what we would teach. One person brought 50 people. The next day she was back in class. We met her at the market, just like a street market. And a lot of those trends, we could see those from a lot of people coming up. So we're saying, when we are looking at this technology, we shouldn't focus on, Africa is very different. And believe me, as much as South Africa is sophisticated and almost everybody in Africa looks at South Africa and says, wow, cash is still king in this country. We cannot run away from that. So it's the same thing. And I'm not even talking about South Africa, including places like Japan. Japan operates on cash, right? So it's a matter of thinking, how do we, I think we had this conversation earlier on before we got here, how do we merge the old with the new? How do we learn from the telcos? How do we learn from your MTN, from your Airtel? What they've done is that they've not thrown away the feature phones, not at all. In fact, they keep manufacturing the feature phones, but they've given the feature phones accessibility to be able to operate on mobile money. So I don't need to have a smartphone in order for me to send money, right? I don't need to have a smartphone in order for me to receive money. And they're making a killing out of these feature phones, because imagine they target a whole township. And if you go to places like Kenya, like Zambia, I think most of these countries where there's a lot of mobile money, the moment you buy a SIM card, they ask you, oh, do you want a mobile money account with it? Automatically you get a mobile money account with them.
Yaliwe,
right?
I want to pull it back to the education piece, right? Thato, you and I were speaking offline around some of the educational efforts that Yellow Card is actually doing in South Africa and Africa to create more of an understanding around the technologies, what cryptocurrencies and the blockchain can actually do. Could you speak to some of those efforts, Thato?
Yeah, so I think all the time, like we're always looking at different ways in which we, firstly, like increasing adoption, but also awareness around crypto. And for us, it's also working with multiple partners in the ecosystem. And I think, like to Yaliwe's point as well, is just like there's such like a pressing need for education in the industry. Sometimes it might not be evident, even for us. But I think every time when you go and you're on the ground and you're speaking to people, and sort of like trying to convey the ideas, trying to convey sort of like what the blockchain or what crypto is about, and just seeing somebody's eyes just pop out, I think for us, that's something that keeps us going. So we've been working on sort of like a partnership with the Crypto University, trying to put together an educational offering, which people can then access for free, and at the same time learning about crypto, learning about the blockchain, learning about different aspects of the crypto ecosystem. And for us, I think it's been like it's a continuous effort of learning. Like even with Yaliwe, like Yaliwe and I, we've sort of like worked together on a few initiatives. I think Brenton, we've reached out before, and every time is like, how do we learn? How can we learn from the industry? But then at the same time, also refining and trying to get something out into the market, which people can consume, and it makes it easier for them to sort of like come into the ecosystem. Yeah, so for us, I think it's been very important, and it's continuously something that's sort of like top of mind when we sort of looking at the market. We spoke about regulation before. Regulation is all well and good, and I think it's also good, like to Brenton's point, it's good to know why regulation is there, but at the same time, it needs to be coupled with the right education. People not only must they be protected by the state and by regulation, but they also need to be equipped to be able to sort of engage responsibly with the ecosystem. So for us, we're very excited about the initiative that we currently running with the Crypto
Awesome.
University. Yeah, and it's a start. I think we always try to figure out ways of doing it, and that's the beauty of being in the industry. Like there's so many avenues, there's different ways of doing it. But
one of the things, Thato, that I actually want to speak around is adoption and investment.
Yeah.
Right? And like we've spoken about like the ecosystem, but we haven't really touched on like what adoption looks like. Full circle. And Gwera, I actually want to come to you for this one, right? Because you've done a lot of work on product development and fintech and the crypto space at your previous role at 11FS, as well as advising startups and founders. What would you say are some of the best practices when it comes to actually enabling mass adoption of crypto solutions?
So yeah, thank you. First principles, build stuff people want to use or people need. And that's, I think that's not like flashy or cool or that, there's fads obviously, but ultimately people want to use stuff that is useful to them. And, not only will it drive adoption, but it will drive like stickiness and people stick with it. So I'm a proponent of this concept of what we call the crypto or the DeFi mullet. So if you're not familiar with the mullet, the haircut, I don't have it right now, but it is business in the front, party in the back. So it's like kind of like a haircut that looks like that. So whereas the DeFi mullet is referring to the concept of fintech in the front, DeFi powering the back. So things that people understand in the front face of it, whilst the back end is almost obscured from the user, but it's what's powering the back end. I'm of a school of thinking where like we believe that is the future of mass adoption of crypto. So there's this term was coined by the folks over at Bankless DAO, but this is something that I genuinely, I think we're early on in the space, that I think it is a safe and bold time to actually put a stake in the sand and say, this is what I believe in. This is what I think this industry is going in. There's people who are saying, I think it's going to go down the trading route. It's going to be used by hedge funds, blah, blah, blah. Maybe, yes, could be true. But in my opinion, I think that the mass adoption is going to come with products and things that are useful to people, first of all, but that they understand on the front end. They don't have to understand what's going on the back end. My benchmark of understanding this is my mother. I love my mom so much, but my mom is not the most technically savvy person. Only recently has she finally understood how to use like mobile banking, right? So she understands mobile banking because, again, we come to the concept I talked about before, which is skeuomorphism, where things look like something we understand and know, but it's different. So if you look at the internet, right? So previously, app icons look like what we knew them to be. So Instagram used to look like an actual camera. So think about this shift that we've had of skeuomorphism to like utility that is like native to whatever it is, so web native or mobile native. We think also in the names of businesses, right? So like we knew of companies as being a web company or a mobile company. Now it's just a company, right? So the mass adoption is going to come from web. So I truly believe, and you could come find me when I'm old and gray and tell me that I'm wrong, but I believe that every company is going to be, or at least every company that wants to be in the future is going to be adopting some kind of Web3 element to it. So no longer will it be called a Web3 company or a crypto company. It's going to, and we may not even need to know or understand that they're using DeFi liquidity pools in the back end to do savings. All we know is that company is doing savings. Like I said, again, my mother as the benchmark. My mom is not going to sit around in Discords and like opening up a MetaMask wallet, a Phantom wallet, figuring out her seed phrase. No, she's not going to do that. She's going to want a savings account that she can call customer support and be like, hey, I can't log in. But all she has to understand is that what she needs is useful to her and it works. But in the back end, it's obfuscated and it's using a DeFi liquidity pool, which is much, and even the IFC came out with data recently. They categorically said that decentralized finance is cheaper and more affordable for end users than traditional centralized finance. So we're kind of coming to that, we're about to have, I think, what is called the iPhone moment or the email moment of Web 2, for example, where people just use it and it just works. Same thing, in my previous life in fintech, I came across, I worked with mortgages, I worked with neobanks, all sorts of things, payments, and I learned that no one wants a mortgage. People want a house. So build stuff that people want, and then that's going to drive adoption. So that's what I think is going to be the future of adoption, mass adoption at least.
It's funny, as you were saying, every company will be a Web3 company. It got me thinking about that old A16Z piece where it's every company will
Melissa
be a
Strange
technology company. And I think philosophically, I'm like incredibly aligned with that. Brenton, coming to you, every crypto venture needs a home and a hub to help these types of innovations become a reality. And we know that CVVC recently launched CV Labs Cape Town at Workshop 17. Can you tell us a little bit more about this and the kinds of opportunities that this offers blockchain and fintech startups in the city?
Absolutely. Look, I think one thing I just want to start off with is we're a global VC, but obviously my team is Africa focused, and the caliber of African entrepreneurs is just on a whole different level. And I think it's because we face a lot of challenges that your more mature venture markets don't face. And I'll get to the point now. But one of those big challenges is the lack of access to knowledge and the lack of access to capital. And those are some of the problems that we're trying to solve specifically in the blockchain space. And we've opened up this hub, which is basically a co-working space. I mean, it's super reasonable to be able to get a membership there. But the value there is, coming back to the conference example, now relative to your Web 2 companies or, AI, etc., there's relatively few of us. But while we might all have different businesses in the blockchain crypto space, we face a lot of the same challenges. We have a lot of the same needs, in terms of technical needs, in terms of mentorship, in terms of working with banks, getting connections here, it spans across. But putting all of these people together in a space, that it allows them to grow, as a group so much more. But then we've also complemented the space with expertise, right? So we've got like weekly office hours where we will have people like Grant from Stitch, for example. So this is your formal invite, Grant, to come. And if you have specific payment queries and challenges, once a week, there'll be a few slots that you can book as a startup and chat to some real experts in the space, which previously you wouldn't have had access to. I mean, if you're building on Polygon, you can literally chat to someone from the Polygon global team. on how to structure your grants, on accessing
Brenton,
the ID.
a follow-up question on that, because like I'm super curious to understand this now. So you're laying a lot of these rails for these startups to learn and essentially build in this space. But what is it that you then look for as a company? And if there's like other startup founders that are on this call, what is it that you're essentially assessing for investment related purposes at your fund?
Perfect. So, I mean, I don't want to get into too much startup jargon, but basically we focus on really early stage companies. So like in terms of like investor jargon, it's pre-seed, seed, series A. And traditionally that's been the biggest missing gap in founders being able to get funding. And that's where we focus. And just in terms of our broad mandate, before I speak specifically to the tips for founders, so we invest in these early stage companies where either the Africa is your core addressable market, the founding team is majorly African or African diaspora as well. And this is quite unique, and there hasn't been a lot of things really earmarked for African founders. And then what we look for specifically in founders is because it's early stage, right? Generally, they haven't earned any revenue yet. Sometimes, you know, they haven't got a very sophisticated MVP. So we've really got to, you know, the saying goes, back the jockey. So we want to know that the team behind this is the right team that has the correct expertise to build this thing and solve this problem. I mean, coming back to Gwera, building things people want. So secondly, we want to make sure that what you're building, you know, isn't just, for example, someone building something for blockchain sake or releasing a token that's the next meme coin. Are you solving a big African problem, and is that problem big enough? So you might be solving a very specific problem that 300 people have very well, but that's not a scalable business, right? So we want to know, is this a multi-million dollar problem? Probably like 100 million, 200, $500 million problem that people are having, you know, in really big markets. So, and is it a big problem? And can you solve that problem? And a note to founders here, be very specific in who your team and your advisory board is. So, you know, nobody is a master of all trades. So if you're a very technical guy, find somebody, you know, with a more business development and an extrovert personality that you can partner with, that has, you know, if you're building something in the fintech space that comes from a bank or comes from a fintech company. You know, if you're a little bit junior, bring on some senior advisors in the space, people like Gwera, like Yaliwe, like Grant, like Thato. You know, and build a very strong team. So we're confident that you say, hey, you're going to build a business that, you know, is the best remittance business in the world. You've actually got a team that shows us you can do that. You're doing it in a market or solving a problem that's big enough. So remittance, as an example, is big enough. And then we also want to see an MVP. So we will not fund you off, you know, a great smile and a pitch deck. So you've got to put some blood, sweat, and tears in building and showing us what is this product going to look like. And
Brenton, I'm gonna pause you there, because I think that that's like a really good place to move into the next section, which is essentially go-to-market strategies, right? And I've got a burning question, because once a company actually defines its mission and its purpose, and they have a product that they believe has utility and maybe even some potential, like going to market is the next hurdle. And we've got people on this call that have done that successfully, right? So Thato, coming to you and your operations at Yellow Card, we know that you operate across multiple markets in South Africa, in Africa. And the tricky thing about Africa is each market has its own distinct regulations and nuances in the market. How have you approached market expansion? And as like a tip or advice, like what has your approach been in gaining your like first 1,000 users? Like would love for you to share some of the learnings on that.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So, and it's very important to sort of like pick on the fact that as Yellow Card, we are building across the continent in multiple markets. So the question of scale also comes into the fact how you're building a product which basically can address 16 countries. and making sure that it runs and works reliably. If I go into Yellow Card, it's going to do what I expect it to do. So I think that's one of the key elements, and that's something that we pay a lot of attention to as a company. The next one as well is, and it's also, I think, having the advantage of seeing like different launches. Each market is different. There's similarities in terms of how you go about it, but each one is different. In some markets, we're able to engage with regulators, bring them on board, try to figure out what sort of licensing regime they have in the works, before we actually able to establish anything. In some markets, we able to sort of like drive adoption from the ground. And I think it's always important to speak to existing communities. So for us in the South African context, it was actually identifying sort of like existing communities, people who are already participating in the space, not only to learn from them, but also I think to sort of like sense check what some of our assumptions were. Is back to the point, like, is this product that we're offering something that people actually want in the market? So that's very important. And even to this day, as we're working on introducing new products, new features, new feature partnerships, there's always an element of going back to the customer or to the end user and trying to find out, like, is this something that's going to work? If not, yeah, we have a very nice trash can where we're able to chuck things away, and we have to be comfortable to do that when we're going into a market, which sometimes it's uncharted territory. The next bit is
I'm gonna pause you there because there's two other points that I'd like to cover here. One is Yaliwe, right? You've done a lot of work in advising crypto startups on go-to-market strategies and product development, right? Could you tell us or just share a little bit of advice with the audience today around some of the common challenges that you see in the space, like just 2 to 3 pieces?
Okay, was that for me? Because everybody's quiet.
Yes, Yaliwe, for you.
Okay, so I think I missed part of that, but I think I heard the last part about the 3 challenges, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so you've done a lot of work advising crypto startups on go-to-market strategies and product development, right? Could you share a little bit more about this and some advice with our audience today? Like, what are the common or most common challenges that you see in the space? You could give like 2 to 3 pieces.
Okay, so I think firstly the first challenge is not understanding the market. So I believe every startup, every organization that is trying to go into a certain place, you need to understand the market. So you need to work around your go-to-market strategy or your go-to-market playbook, right? That is very critical. And also, who's your target audience? And also, what type of product are you going to build for them that is acceptable to them, but also really something very simple for that target audience. Secondly, it's localization. I believe localization is very important. Why do I say that? I want to feel like I'm part of what you're building. Nobody wants to be sold things. That's what I feel. If you approach me and you tell me you're going to use this because at the end of it all, you're making a profit, automatically you feel like I'm a target, right? I want to feel like I'm part of what you're building. There's me, there's a thought, and that thought is me at the end of that product, right? So the localization, whether it's in the way you relay your messages and the way you interact with that particular audience is very important. And also the last thing is value. What is the real value to who you're serving? Not only yourself, but to what is the real value that goes to them? Does it really change the circumstances that they're in? Does it make things easier for them? You know, that kind of, so firstly, it's your go-to-market strategy, your playbook, localization, and the value addition. That's the advice that I would give to anybody that is looking into going into a certain area.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for that. I think this wouldn't be a crypto conversation, and we're gonna start winding it down. But it wouldn't be a crypto conversation if we didn't address some of like the wider macroeconomic markets. And we know that we're still in some serious recovery road or recovery mode. And Brenton, wanted to get some of your thoughts on the current market conditions. I think like two to three thoughts, and then have one last question for Gwera and the rest of the panel.
No, perfect. Look, I'm going to keep it quite simple. I think as much as we in the crypto sector and industry like to think that we're, separated and completely unique, unfortunately, crypto, if you think about who uses it the most, it's people using it as an asset class. So it's a lot of these institutional type players who are driving, the price actions in crypto. And if we look at what's been happening wider with, record beating inflation, massive amounts of money coming into the system, huge stimulus checks, it's really distorted the economic situation. So for those of you who aren't watching, the CNNs and the Bloombergs of the world, stocks like Shopify, etc., are down more than crypto at the moment, year to date. And I think that's going to be the major driving factor in what happens to crypto, over the short term, right? So as soon as we see, to keep it simple, as soon as we see inflation start to come down in some of the first world markets, we start to see them ease off on their interest rate increases and potentially start decreasing interest rates. That's likely when we'll see stock markets turn up aggressively, but with those, the crypto markets as well. So if you want to make a good trade, make sure you're following the traditional markets. That would be my view, at least.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. I think as we wrap up, right, and just before we go, there's like one last point that I'd like to touch on. Gwera, coming to you, right? So you're incredibly passionate about telling the African story about crypto, and would love to ask you, as well as each of the other panelists, what does the African story about crypto look like to each of you? So Gwera, we'll kick off with you. We'll then go to Yaliwe, Thato, and then Brenton, round off with you.
Let's do a quick fire. So I'm gonna be that contrarian that gives the most cop-out answer. And my answer is, I know what it's not. In my bones, I feel that the African story around crypto is not about financial inclusion. I think that financial inclusion is something that we've heard for many, many years, my entire lifetime as a young person that I am. We've heard the financial inclusion story for so long. Mobile money, Visa, credit cards, debit cards. We've heard that story. I'm not convinced that the story for African crypto is not financial inclusion. It is not about adoption of financial services. If anything, we are inundated with financial services. If you look at Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, Nigeria, MFS Africa, we sit in a position right now where we have access to interoperability across mobile money services across the continent. Financial inclusion is happening. The work is being done. I just cannot confidently say what is the story right now, which is why I'm actually curious to hear what you guys have to say. What is our story about that? And feel free to disagree with me. If it is financial inclusion, I'm okay to being challenged here. But what do you guys think?
I want to switch up the order a little bit. Thato, would love to hear your opinion next, because I think when you opened up a little bit earlier, you mentioned being about financial inclusion. So if you do have conflicting views, please share those now.
Yeah, so I think I still hold on to crypto, not necessarily usher in, but I think it's going to be a very good platform for financial inclusion. Financial inclusion means everything to everyone. But I think when you look at sort of like all the different markets and how sort of like people are adopting crypto, and especially if I look at Nigeria or if I look at Kenya, I think it's very interesting sort of the way in which people are making use of crypto, especially as an asset class, specifically with the utility of hedging against sort of existing maybe currency risks or economic pressure. So for me, that is financial inclusion. That's giving people accessibility to something that previously wasn't there and is now there to potentially allow them to get into a better situation or come out of a worse off situation.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Yaliwe, would love to get your take on what you think the African story for crypto would look like.
Okay, I was just about to say, let me just go home. It looks like everybody's just said everything, but for me, blockchain crypto for Africa is a liberator, an equalizer. That's our story, right? So many times, a lot of products have been dumped on us. And let me say dumped because we had to adopt certain things that did not even work for us, but we had to work through them. But now Africans are able to innovate. You can see VC firms like CVVC coming in and say, we want African ideas, right? It's a liberator. It's for me to think outside the box and create for my problems. So that's my African story. I might not have the infrastructure, but I can be where the rest of the world is at when it comes to blockchain technology.
Awesome, thank you. Brenton, take us away.
No, brilliant. I mean, I think I share sentiments with all of the panelists today, but I'm going to shoot off from an African perspective. What are some of the use cases I'm most excited about? And I just want to caveat this with, I completely agree with Gwera. When the internet came about, everyone was like, oh, email. And then 20 years later, we're holding a piece of glass and, speaking to people across the world. So I do think we haven't even begun to sort of ideate the real solutions, but in the medium term, things I'm most excited about for Africa are, making remittances far more effective, efficient, especially micro remittances. You've got the case where, people are saving up all their lives, sending their children to study abroad. And this is more the wider Africa. And, they're sending home $100 a week potentially at their earning waiting tables in the UK. And it's taking 2 weeks to get there. 15 to 20% of that money is being, eroded to the system. And it could be spent here on the African continent. So remittances and micropayments, I'm also quite excited about. I think micropayments opens up African content creators, artists and creatives to far more monetization streams from a global audience. And then I'll finish off with a unique one. I think building on an existing wider trend, I think African and South African art and the creative space in general has taken off globally. Everything from Amapiano to South African actual artists are just being, absolutely coughed up by the global market at the moment. And I think Africa has that talent, even on a more medium and micro scale level, but those artists don't have the means, the channels and the rails to access this global audience. And I do think, Web3, micropayments, things like NFTs, the creator economy space will really open up the ability for African creatives to access a far more effective and wider market. And then the final one that I'm quite excited about, which sort of comes out of the actual technology use cases, is in South Africa, we've got a massive youth unemployment problem. The only thing that can solve that we know effectively is the private sector, and the private sector doesn't have an environment to be able to grow and create that quickly to solve that that employment problem. But blockchain development talent, specifically in Africa, go and try and find an open blockchain developer that is currently unemployed in Africa. It is impossible. And blockchain companies, wider than that, the crypto companies, they have marketing departments, BD departments, graphic designers, and they're natively remote first. And if you look at the first time that having a weak currency on the global stage is a benefit, is for these global companies to pay $1,000 for a social media manager is absolutely nothing. But for us here in South Africa, with a laptop, that's a young unemployed person who could be earning 17,000 Rand a month. So I think if we play this the right way, it's a massive unemployment alleviator for South Africa and the wider African continent as well. But yeah, I think those are just the key things I'm most excited about.
Hopefully we've
But
got
before
some
you-
mental players and lawmakers on the call to hear this as well. Gwera, you had a
But
point?
before we wrap, I want to turn it to you, Grant, as you know, you're biz dev at Stitch, one of the foremost open banking fintech companies on the continent. What are your thoughts? And you can also say your thoughts personally or Stitch's thoughts. I mean, up to you.
Yeah, I think so. I'll speak for myself personally, right? So much has been said on this call around some of the use cases that crypto would essentially alleviate on the continent. And I think that like work opportunities, the movement of money, so just from a remittance company, a remittance perspective, cross border is something that will unite the continent. I think like where we've always been lacking in Africa is because of the nuances of the market. We don't have any interconnectivity or interoperability, right? And this is essentially what blockchain, crypto really provides, right? I think I'm excited to enable more of that, see more companies pop up that essentially allow this to take place as well. But we're gonna end it there. Thanks so much, everyone, for your time. Gwera, Yaliwe, Thato, Brenton, and thanks everyone for attending as well. Yeah, please keep your eyes peeled on the Stitch socials. We'll also release something around this panel post events. But thanks everyone. Enjoy your evening.
Awesome. Thanks, Grant.
All right. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Grant.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.